Welcome back to another Star Minigaming YouTube video, and this is the first in a new series of videos I'm doing, kind of responding to some of the common objections to the game Age of Sigmar. You may or may not be aware of the fact that the game is growing, at least, in quite a few markets that I have connections with via either my own personal area of influence that I live in, or many of those of people that I know personally in different parts of the country and around the world, really. But oftentimes on the internet we see things by angry people, and it's not just to Age of Sigmar, it's to anything, towards Disney for the destruction of the Star Wars expanded universe. Anytime there's any kind of change or reboot, or actually recently I've been seeing a lot of anger towards Marvel for their newest twist on Captain America and his new comic series of him supposedly being an agent of Hydra. I'm not going to comment one way or the other on any of those kinds of things, but I wanted to address a lot of the kind of angry internet chat. Because it's fine if you don't enjoy a game, if there's aspects of a game that you don't like, or if it's just not to your particular taste. That's all well and good. Everyone has their preferences, and I'm not trying to take anything away from that. However, what I do personally have a problem with is whenever untruths or lies, are, whether intended or not, are put out there, honestly, about anything. I live in America, and the political realm is perhaps one of the best examples of that in the world. The amount of what's termed mudslinging, just throwing quite often untruths at each other as opposed to addressing the actual issues in place, is quite commonplace, and I can't stand it there either. So I wanted to do this series of videos and to dispel, classic Warhammer Fantasy, pun intended, a lot of the misconceptions about Age of Sigmar, and this isn't to convince people who don't like the game for whatever reason, whether it's aesthetics or whether it's the style of the game, or the fact that GW cut Warhammer Fantasy Battle, and so because of that, they don't like GW anymore, they don't want to play their games. That's fine. Those are all legitimate reasons. But these videos are intended to be kind of a response to the hyper negativity that isn't truthful, so that people who might be interested and are otherwise turned off by that negativity might actually give the game a chance. So the first one I want to talk about, because this is the one that I personally address the most often, is that Age of Sigmar is not tactically deep. Now, as with everything that I'm going to talk about in this, first off, that's not true. If we understand, the definition of tactically deep as containing a lot of tactical decisions that you have to make, and your ability to process those and make the correct decisions, having a significant impact on your game. So, if we define tactical depth as that being important, and there being layers of tactics within the game, then Age of Sigmar is absolutely 100% tactically deep, rather than lacking it. That's often claimed. Now, I'm going to go into that in just a moment. I just want to talk about, first off, we'll actually go with the dictionary definition of what tactical is, to kind of further expound on that, and then I'll talk about why that's important to myself, and why this particular untruth is the most of a pet peeve of my own. So as you can see here, we have the Merriam-Webster dictionary definition, if you will, of the term tactical. The simple definition is of or relating to or used for a specific plan that is created to achieve a particular goal in war, politics, etc. Full definition, or an extended definition, is of or relating to tactics as of or relating to a small-scale action serving a larger purpose, made or carried out with a limited or immediate view and that is the difference between tactics and strategy. Strategy is the long-term, tactical is the short-term, more of the immediate goal. So that, to go back to what I initially kind of said, if we define tactically deep as, in a game, having multiple places in which you need to use tactics to help determine the outcome of the game, to be potentially the difference between winning and losing, and for there to be multiple variables within the game that you at all times have to consider. A few examples I've given are, do I commit my Hex Wraiths to combat against this Carnosaur? The couple things that I have to consider on the tactical standpoint is, can they win this fight? Yes or no? If not, can they at least survive the fight? Yes or no? And then a more of the strategic consideration, but it also could be the tactical, because it is, again, short term, is, if they don't survive, can the damage that they do to the Carnosaur in weakening it for the rest of the game, or the time that they buy the rest of my forces while that Carnosaur is tied up, can that, or will that positively influence the outcome, or can that be enough to positively influence the outcome of this battle in my favor? And that's just a few examples, or that's just an example of tactical consideration that you would have to make in a game like Age of Sigmar or Warhammer Fantasy, or really any other game. Just substitute out the units that you're using. That's just one of the aspects that you have to keep your mind on while approaching the game. And if there's multiple of those kinds of decisions that you're having to make, then for the purposes of this video, that's what we would define as being tactically deep. Alright, now that we've defined it, I'll talk real briefly about why this particular untruth bugs me so much more than others. I love strategy and tactical games. I've been playing real-time strategies and turn-based strategy games, and to a lesser degree RPGs, as long as I've played video games, honestly. It's the genres that have appealed to me the most and that I spend the most time in. In fact, I don't play any other games other than those hardly ever, video game wise, anymore. It's just, they're what I'm interested in. I grew up, even as a young child, wanting to, my dream job was to end up in the military, in a position such as, similar to the one that I'll post a link to below, such as the Air Force Special Tactics Officer. It was my dream to become, for whatever branch of the American military, a tactical officer, because I love tactics that much, right? I'm passionate about it. That's why so much of my YouTube channel is devoted to tactics, which you will typically see, in my videos. I will talk more about the broad concept and then give specific examples for how to use the broad concept in, specific situations in whatever game I might be speaking directly on in that video. But something I've always enjoyed as a child, elementary school age. I read The Art of War for the first time. I've read it several times since. I've spent quite a bit of time, of my own personal time, looking at different strategies and tactics deployed militarily throughout history, such as, and the evolution of tactics, such as, the Greeks being finally defeated by the Macedonians, and, Alexander the Great's father, I believe it was, through the use of their, I forgot the term, their pike blocks, their phalanxes, being tighter and closer together, their troops, and their spears being slightly longer than most of the Greeks, and that way they were able to penetrate the Greek lines more effectively and literally rip basically channels through their opponent's lines. Obviously the 300 Spartans at Thermopylae is another very famous example of battlefield tactics in action, where the 300 Spartans, knowing that they had the superior quality of warriors and the superior weaponry, using the terrain around them to deny the Persian Empire the advantage of their greater numbers, and to remove that from the equation. And those are, a couple examples of tactics throughout history, and it's been something that's fascinated me my entire life, and I try to apply it honestly to any game that I play. It doesn't matter if it's if it's a tabletop war game like Age of Sigmar or Warhammer Fantasy Battles or 40K or X-Wing or whatever it might be. It can be a game as simple as Monopoly or Uno or checkers, right? Or chess. Chess is obviously a very tactical game. But no matter what game I play, I always apply tactics to it. And there's never been a game that I've come across, not even tic-tac-toe, that you cannot apply tactics to it, right? And you wouldn't benefit from it. Now, sometimes, that doesn't mean you always win against the person who just kind of blindly charges in and does whatever they do in those games. But it does mean that you have a significant advantage, and I would assume statistically, if you were to track your games versus that one opponent, you would win the majority of the time. If you understand tactics and have a grasp on how to adapt to the situation. With that being said, that's why tactics are particularly important to me. That's why that particular statement that I see so often online is particularly a pet peeve of mine, because it's untrue, and it stems from a misunderstanding of what tactics and tactical depth is and what it is not. But that's going to be it for this one. I just wanted to, real briefly cover this particular topic. There will be a few more in this series, but until next time, this is James, and happy gaming.